welcome. My name is Chad Baker. Joining me this evening are the two Democratic candidates for the 4th Congressional District. To my left is Mr. Ken Lee.
Good evening.
And across the table is Mr. Harry Perkinson.
Hello.
Gentlemen, thank you for joining me this evening. I appreciate it. We're just going to start off tonight by giving a brief introduction of yourself and talk a little bit about what brought you to the tough decision to run for Congress.
Well, the day after Todd Platts announced his retirement, I got some phone calls from some people. I have been involved in politics for a while as a state committee person, a local committee person, involved heavily in Joe Sestak's campaign. And out of that, some people called me, encouraged me to get in. For several years, I have been advocating the fact that we have to find a way to keep our kids here. We are having a brain drain here in Pennsylvania. We've become a very, very old state. So, advocating ideas as to how to keep our kids here, how to better education system, how to fund the education system, how to create good paying jobs. We are in the middle of a metropolitan area of about 6.7 million people, and we should have an attitude, we should have the jobs, and we have the most valuable resource, our people, to bring in businesses and other matters that will keep our kids here. There are few, if any, opportunities for our kids to remain here. They are going to the DC, Baltimore area. They are going to the Philadelphia area. So I had been a long time advocate of that. And so between that, between my involvement in with labor, between my involvement with women's rights, people called me and encouraged me to get into it. After some consideration, not long consideration, I decided to throw my hat into the ring.
Very good. Mr. Perkinson, what brought you to run for Congress?
I basically got tired of writing letters to the editor and to my congressmen and my senators and not getting adequate responses. I realized that the country was headed in a direction that needed to be corrected, that the emphasis was being put on the debt and the deficit, and we really needed to think about getting 13 million people that are unemployed back to work and the 14 or so million underemployed people into better jobs. I think the debt and the deficit was a boogeyman created by the Republican Party. You have to have somebody something that's going to reach out from under the bed and grab you for them to run. And I actually announced my candidacy at the state Democratic meeting in State College a few days before Mr. Platts announced his decision not to run. I'm doing this because it was something that we have to take back this government. It's of the people, for the people, by the people. So we have to take it back, and the Republican Party sold out special interests.
Okay. Well, the first question I have this evening is in relation to the economy and jobs. Over the past few years under President Obama, we know that the economy is rebounding, and we know that private sector job growth in the last 24 months has been on the rise. Explain what role you feel, if any, that Congress should play in sustaining or expanding the job growth. And we'll start actually with Mr. Perkinson.
There are several things that can be done at the federal level in order to expand the economy. The first thing would be to come up with a industrialization policy where we actually try to figure out where we want to be in the future with regard to different types of manufacturing and high-tech industries, and promoting investments in those directions, in those industries and technologies. We can do this by doing immediate job creation akin to the Conservation Corps, Civilian Conservation Corps during the Depression, or the Work Projects Agency also during the Depression era, and get people off of long-term unemployment, give them an adequate wage so that they can get back into the tax base. Then we need to do long-term development where we do the industrialization and try to get new industry and new technologies developed. We lost a lot of things by allowing other countries to take technology and develop it. And we need to, set up the tax code so that those things are discouraged, that the manufacturing is brought back into the United States so people can have good, high-paying jobs based on technology and manufacturing.
Okay. Mr. Lee?
The biggest thing we could do right now is invest in education. Not only education at the traditional levels of kindergarten or actually preschool through 12th grade and college and our technical schools, but also education for those people who are either underemployed or unemployed at this point. Education overcomes an awful lot of limitations in life. Education prepares you. Education prepares you to go into a new job. It prepares you to transfer from one job to another. In addition to that, the other way we can do it, and if we don't do it, if we don't have a huge investment in infrastructure, we are not going to have a future. If we do not invest in education, if we do not invest in our kids, if we do not invest in those who are underemployed or unemployed, and if we do not invest in our infrastructure, we will not have much of a future. So infrastructure means water and sewer, roads and bridges, electrical grid, things of that nature. Those two big investments will go a long way to bringing jobs and to preparing this economy and this society for the future that awaits us.
Okay. Earlier this year, the President discussed in his State of the Union address his intent to cut federal financial aid to higher education institutions that continue to raise their tuition costs. We know here in the state of Pennsylvania, for 2 years in a row, the governor has proposed substantial cuts to education, to post-secondary education. And we know that ultimately means that those institutions are going to raise their tuition costs as well. What solutions do you have in mind to maybe better balance this issue between the president not wanting tuition rates to be raised and the governor here in the state wanting to cut funding for those schools?
Well, I was somewhat critical of the president in that regard because it was almost saying that we're not going to invest in education. We have to set certain priorities in terms of what our government expenditures are going to be, obviously. But as I said just previously, if we don't invest in education, we don't have a future. What we can do is invest perhaps in endowments, in terms, make those attractive to investors, public market, even especially the private market. Find ways where students can work off or repay their student loans. But if we don't invest, we have to stop it. The worst part about it is, for instance, Governor Corbett here, Pennsylvania has 22 of the 30 high or most expensive colleges, public colleges and universities in this country. And we have to invest. It's because of that, the failure to invest in education, without equivocation and ambiguity, that are driving our kids out of Pennsylvania. And it is a family problem. It is breaking families apart. Grandparents can't see their grandkids, and we have to reverse that trend.
Okay.
First of all, the federal government should take over the student loan program completely. There shouldn't be no private interaction in the student loan program. The spending in higher education is not spending, it's an investment. We need to get more graduate degrees going to U.S. citizens as opposed to having people from other countries come here, get their graduate degrees, work for a few years, and then go back to their countries. There are lots of opportunities to expand the Pell Grants, so that we don't have the disparity in the population that we do now economically. We have the 1% or the top 5% are really pulling away from the rest of everybody else. And part of that function is education. As Mr. Lee said, education is the way to correct a large number of problems. And having the federal government invest in education is really critical. I don't think we need to be trying to dictate to colleges what their tuition should be. What we should do is making sure that qualified students get to go to college regardless of their level of income and their capability of meeting the economic requirements.
The next question kind of touches on one of the hot button issues of today, and that's gas prices. We know York Countyans as well as Pennsylvanians, everyone in the United States essentially is feeling the pinch at the pump right now. And this is something obviously that's been a problem for presidents, for Congress, for Senate, of all parties for decades. Talk a little bit about what solutions you may have for lowering fuel costs in the short term, and then certainly expand on how can we resolve that problem in the long term as well. We'll start with Harry.
In the short term, I'm not sure there's a lot that can be done. It's market driven, and there's ever increasing demand in the world as standards of living rise in what were used to be called developing countries. There's not a lot that we can do to drive the market in that regard. What we need to be doing is looking at coming up with alternative ways to provide energy. If the natural gas production really pans out to be as great as people say it is, we can convert to methanol as a fuel, and it's right now it's running about $3 a gallon, which is significantly cheaper than gasoline. You need almost twice as much of it, but with higher production rates, the price will drop. And plus, it's a local fuel. We're not exporting. We're not affecting our balance of payments. The other thing we could do is gradually realize that by changing the CAFE standards, the mileage standards for the vehicle fleets, we'll be able to cut down on the amount of oil that we have to import. The problem we have is we're creating veterans by defending our foreign oil. And there's something wrong when a person can drive a huge vehicle, one person driving down the road at 60 miles an hour in order to go buy a loaf of bread, when they could have chosen an alternative way of getting there and not have us have to send somebody to the Middle East in order to make sure that we have an oil supply.
Okay. Mr. Lee?
Well, one of the quickest ways we could do it, if we could find spots to do it, is we would have to build some extra refineries in this country. Believe it or not, last year this country's trade gap, import-export trade gap, was decreased substantially because our biggest export last year was oil and gasoline. The other big way we could advance and probably bring down the price per barrel of oil is we have to calm the foreign matters that are going on, particularly in the Persian Gulf. Clamoring by the Republicans to bomb Iran, to start another war in the Middle East, only causes oil prices to go up because people are worried, particularly those who buy and sell oil, whether or not the supply is going to be cut off. In addition to that, we are on the verge, I believe, of a huge alternative fuel explosion in terms of technology and things of that nature that hopefully will wean us off at least gasoline, or at least enough of it that we can provide our own. But immediate relief can be provided by maybe constructing refineries if we can find places to do them, and being able to settle down the nerves of investors by being able to calm the fears or calm the situation overseas.
Okay. a lot of the questions we've talked about so far obviously have dealt with domestic issues, and obviously with the last question, Mr. Lee kind of started to allude to some more foreign policy type issues. Congress is often tackling these matters. When I say a country, I'm gonna give you just a few countries here. When I say their name, just give me your thoughts on that country and what issues you foresee with those particular nations. And we'll start with Mr. Lee, and actually you've already mentioned it, and that's Iran.
Iran. In recent days, we've heard conflicting information as to whether or not Iran's program is on a path towards nuclear weapons or whether or not it's for peaceful means. We have to be careful and be precise. We saw what happened when false information about potential nuclear arms, weapons of mass destruction other than nuclear weapons allegedly occurred in Iraq. We had thousands of our brave soldiers die, tens of thousands of them wounded over maybe a war that should not have occurred. So in terms of Iran, I think we have to continue the sanctions, step them up continuously. Word has come out and being publicized that these sanctions are working because Iran is now asking to go back to the table in order to see if it can't negotiate off these sanctions. And if we get in there and make a deal with Iran, then everything has to be verifiable.
If we bomb Iran, we fail. We've just opened up a huge conflagration in the Middle East. We have to continue the diplomatic efforts that are being conducted now. We have to continue the sanctions. We also have to remember that it's not all stick. Sometimes the carrot will work just as well. So we have to look at the information being provided through the intelligence services with regard to what is actually happening in Iran, and be very, very careful in our judgment as to what we wind up doing there. To bomb Iran is a huge mistake.
The next country, and we'll go to Mr. Perkinson first, is North Korea.
North Korea is an enigma in that when we think we have a solution worked out with them, they retract it. There is a real distinct possibility that working through China will be able to affect change in North Korea that's acceptable to both China and South Korea. So again, it's not a military solution. It's going to have to be diplomatic. And we have some leverage in the fact that their economy doesn't work very well, and we can provide food and supplies that they're not able to generate for themselves. That's worked before, and I think we should continue along that path where we make sure that there's containment. I don't think we should allow them to threaten the neighbors with missiles, and I don't think that we should allow them to do any further nuclear tests and not have some sort of penalty or sanction involved with it. North Korea is one of those places where it won't be able to sustain itself. We just have to wait it out.
We have to continue to isolate, I think, North Korea, but in a humanitarian way. Several somewhat similar scenarios have occurred, particularly since the end of the Vietnam War, and Vietnam is actually a very good example of whereby we isolated the government, yet we were careful of the humanitarian needs. I think that we have to do that because once the people of a particular country, Vietnam, we saw it in Bosnia and several others, once they find out what good the Americans want to do, can do, then eventually they throw out their government. They reject their government and realize that peace and prosperity are an appropriate way to go in terms of living their lives.
The last country I'm going to ask about this evening is Afghanistan. Obviously, been in the news consistently for at least the last 11 years. We know that there is the planned withdrawal from Afghanistan, but obviously still a very volatile part of the world. Just your thoughts about Afghanistan.
It's not Afghanistan in and of itself. It is the situation that's brewing in Pakistan. Pakistan does have nuclear weapons and nuclear capabilities. Though I would like to have seen an immediate withdrawal whenever bin Laden was finally captured and assassinated, there are elements within Pakistan that are very friendly towards enemies of this country. And India as well, which is the world's largest democracy. We are going to probably have, because of the nuclear capability of Pakistan, we are probably going to have to keep a presence either in Afghanistan or more strongly in that part of the world, or else Pakistan could well blow up. The Taliban, Al-Qaeda could well get their hands on the atomic weapons that Pakistan has. It is a hugely complicated situation. Afghanistan is a good inroad, maybe to establish some sort and maintain some sort of military force in that area, even though I got to shake my head at times in those terms.
I think we're done in Afghanistan. I think it's time to realize that we've accomplished what we wanted to do in beheading Al-Qaeda. We've tried to set up a government in Afghanistan, and it's time for that government to assume responsibility for moving their own country forward. We need to bring our troops home in the safest manner possible. We don't need to be trying to do any nation building at this time. With respect to Pakistan, I think our removal from Afghanistan will resolve a great number of the problems that Pakistan's having right now. It will allow them to equilibrate to a level where they can resolve their own issues. The part of the problem with what's going on in Pakistan is we're flying drones over their country, killing enemies that we have in Afghanistan. So if we get out, bring the troops home, be very careful about becoming entangled in those kind of foreign intrigues again, I think that would be the best approach for dealing with Afghanistan now.
We're just about out of time this evening, but before we leave, I wanted to give you an opportunity both to kind of give your own parting words to the voters of York County. What are your final thoughts? If there's anything that maybe we didn't discuss that you wanted to share, please feel free to do that. And we'll start with Mr. Perkinson.
I'm from York County. My wife is from Adams County. Our 2 children were born in York Hospital. We've lived here off and on since 1984 when I moved up from DC to take a job in Red Lion. We know a lot about the district. We travel back and forth between York and Gettysburg a lot. We're very involved in the way people live here. We've seen the school systems work and not work. We've seen what happens when you have a congressman from the same party go to Congress since 1967. It's time for a change. It's time to bring a more focused view on the middle class back to Congress, where we can create jobs, get the unemployed back to work, get the underemployed back to work, invest in our education system so our kids can compete at a global level when they get out of school and take over these jobs that we're trying to develop for them here in the district. We can't leave behind our seniors. We can't leave behind our young people. And so it's really important that we change who we send to Washington.
Mr. Lee.
One of the wonderful things being from Cumberland County of these campaigns is being able to go to the other areas of the district and get to learn of them, get to learn of the people. I've gotten to meet an awful lot of the Democrats here in York County. Jamal Alexander over at the Crispus Atticus Center and School, Reverend Cease, the head of the reverends and congregations in the city of York. My brother lives over in Dallastown, and it's really been a wonderful, wonderful experience over the last 2 months now, I guess, to come down to York and visit York quite often and meet people such as the wonderful workers over at the UAW, and on and on and on. It reinforces my nature that the most valuable resource in this congressional district is its people. I'm an attorney. I have been for 25 years in wide-ranging matters, and my clients are most often, besides my daughter, are the most important thing in my life. And I intend to treat the people of this congressional district as my clients, to go and advocate on their behalf for them and let the nation and the world know that our most valuable resource are our people.
Okay. Thank you very much. I want to thank both of you gentlemen for taking time out of your, what we know is a very busy campaign schedule, to join us this evening. And I also want to thank our viewers for tuning in tonight to watch both of these congressional candidates talk about the issues. Don't forget, primary day is April 24th. Get out and exercise your right to vote. Thank you, and have a good evening.